Good evening. I'd like to take you back almost 14 years ago. In 2011, Barack Obama, then President Obama, had a very important piece of legislation that was time sensitive that he needed to sign. Problem was, he was not in the United States. He was at G8 summit. So he contacted an aide in Washington, D.C. to use an Autopen. As far as our knowledge, this was the first time a United States president used an Autopen to sign in an important piece of legislation. Well, President Obama was prepared that he would maybe get some questions over this. So he pointed to a Department of Justice document that says it is perfectly legal for a president to use an auto pen. Now, all these years later, almost 14 years later, we know, thanks to Lindell TV's very own Emerald Robinson, who picked up on this story that President Biden used an auto pen for almost everything. I am yet to hear whether he has an actual signature of any piece of legislation. This is really important, but it's also important that Lindell TV's Emerald Robinson was the one to break the story. Just watch.
And President Trump has now personally commented on the Autopen scandal. He also just revoked the pardons of a bunch of criminals inside the Biden regime as well, with this iconic post. Trump saying that Joe Biden's pardons are void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done with Autopen. Trump adds that Joe Biden didn't know anything about them, and the people that did might have committed a crime. The Autopen scandal has taken the nation by storm ever since our very own Kara Castronova asked a question about it in the briefing room last week. The day before this, White House presser Gabrielle Cuccia had appeared on my show to disclose the identities of the three people who had easy access to Biden's Autopen. But the fact is, we at Lindell TV have been on this story for months, way before the corporate media ever uttered the word Autopen. In fact, we broke this story last year on my TV show, The Absolute Truth, when Gabrielle Cuccia talked about her time in the White House executive clerk's office as she analyzed the mismatching Biden signatures. Here's the show clip. That was July 24th, 2024.
Yes, so that image that you have right here up on the screen where we're deciphering on these five signatures that they're comparing to are actually from executive orders in which the auto pen was utilized. So when you put a human hand to a signature, it's not going to match up to a pre-designated auto pen of which was utilized in those executive orders. Now, the auto pen lives in Office of Records Management. It is foolproof, identical in signature within the White House complex. I've had, like you said, experience in every single time that the president has a signature requirement. If they're not physically present, typically it's taken all the way up into the records management office, and I watch the little pen do its thing and mimic the presidential signature, a vice presidential signature, what have you. So in this case, when you look at those comparisons, that is why it actually does not match up. But then there's that other element too, right? Is that this probably from my last former employment as a security contractor, there are elements of a signature that you would look at that no matter how much you try to obfuscate a signature, there are elements that are just difficult in habit to really hide. So when you do look at the signature, I mean, I would argue that the DNC isn't really hiding too darn hard because of that underlining, right? Like that underlining is in plain sight. It's clear that it's not Joe Biden.
Now, according to Cuccia, the Biden regime had three staff secretaries, Neera Tanden, Jessica Hertz, and Stephanie Feldman. And my bet, some of these ladies might have some explaining to do very soon. Join us now for more on.
I love it because Emerald had names. She knows where the bones are buried. Very happy to introduce Emerald Robinson from Absolute Truth right here on Lindell TV. Welcome to the show.
So good to see you.
It's
Thank you
good
for
to
having
see
me.
you, Emerald. You are such a great journalist, TV host. I am just so impressed that
Thank
over
you.
a year ago, you broke this story and nobody really picked it up. Now it is under such scrutiny. What do you think are the next steps?
I think that the Trump administration is actively looking into it. I don't think it's accidental that well, I will tell you, we know that people pay attention to our reporting here at Lindell TV. And we started doing the Autopen story again. Kara Castronova asked the question in the White House briefing room. But what we've noticed is that there's little indicators that something is going on. You have Alina Habba going to Joe Biden's fake set and pointing out that he had to have a teleprompter, right? He couldn't even do an Oval Office signing or appearance because he had to have a teleprompter, and it had been weird to have a teleprompter in the Oval Office. You see Donald Trump mentioning the Autopen or bringing it up multiple times since our reporting. We have heard, and we have yet to confirm this, Dr. Maria, but that Alina Habba herself has actually been tasked at looking into this Autopen issue, because let's think about the legal ramifications of this. We're talking about pardons. We're talking about executive orders that if you can prove, and Gabrielle Cuccia, who played that clip of my show, she's a former staffer for the Executive Records Office at the White House. So she was tasked with putting through the executive orders during the Obama years, and I think some during the Trump years as well. So she was very familiar with Joe Biden's signature when he was vice president, right? And some of the things that they would have come through there. There would be communications that would probably reveal that these staffers were doing this without the explicit knowledge of Joe Biden. Now, the question is, did you have Jill Biden? Jill Biden probably knew what was going on. We got to really see there at the end that when she led the cabinet meeting. But it's not just about saying, oh, Joe Biden didn't even know what was going on. No, this has major ramifications, because a lot of those executive orders that Donald Trump is trying to roll back and getting pushed back by these activist judges in these, banana republic courts, they might not even be valid anyway, the executive orders that Biden signed, because he didn't even know. And remember, there was that soundbite, that interview with Speaker Johnson, where he talked to Joe Biden face to face in the Oval Office about some actions against LNG, liquid natural gas. And Joe Biden didn't even know what he was talking about. And Speaker Johnson said, Mr. President, you signed this. So this could really have some major implications for pardons, those preemptive pardons. Donald Trump has already said those are null and void, because it doesn't look like Joe Biden knew what he was signing. So this is big. This could allow for some of those investigations to go forward. And for me, that was good news, because I want to see people like Dr. Tony Fauci investigated and hopefully face criminal charges.
Absolutely. And some of those pardons were to murderers, pedophiles, which, by the way, was unlike the old Joe Biden. I never had respect for the man because I knew he was a crook. Then I had empathy when he got dementia really bad. But looking at old clips, he was kind of a moderate guy. He did believe in law and order. I was shocked at some of the people he pardoned, and now he probably didn't. It was probably one of his staffers. Emerald, do you know how prevalent it is to use the Autopen? In my research, I could only find one incident, and it was President Obama, who was overseas at a G8 conference, and he had important legislation. So he called the office and had the Autopen used, and then backed it up with some DOJ report that said it was legal. But that's the only documentation I could find was for that one incident. And President Trump has come out and said he may use it for letters or congratulating a young person on an achievement, but never for a bill or a pardon.
Well, we all know that Donald Trump is one of the best TV producers there is out there, and he loves a good production. So every executive order signing, turns into a full-scale production, and the pins are commemorative, and he gets them away. So he's just on a whole different level altogether. But what we do know, in looking back historically, is that Democrat administrations, Democrat presidents tend to use Autopen more often than Republicans do, but none of them came close to how often Joe Biden used it. And what I loved, you mentioned that we had the names of the 3 staffers that had access to his Autopen, and what I don't think people have really honed in on yet, but really stood out to me, is that Neera Tanden was one of those staffers. Neera Tanden is a Susan Rice loyalist. She came from the Domestic Policy Council, where Susan Rice was the director under Joe Biden, and she came to be a staff secretary in the White House. Remember when we were all asking the question, who's actually running things? Because while the corporate media pretended they didn't know till the very end that he was senile, come on, Dr. Maria, you and I, the mayor, everybody else, it was obvious that Joe Biden, he was gone in the campaign in 2020. He was barely able to be mentally there to sit in his basement. So we knew that he wasn't running things, and there was these names floating around. And Susan Rice was one of the names that many of us had suggested was really largely pulling the strings and running things behind the scenes in the name of Joe Biden. This Autopen story adds a lot of credence to that theory, because Neera Tanden, as a Susan Rice loyalist who had come from her office, had access to that Autopen. So I would suspect that Susan Rice and she were still very much in communication and in collaboration. So I would venture to say and speculate that Susan Rice was behind a lot of these particularly progressive executive orders that we saw.
I always believe she still had her nose in it. And what I'm concerned about, Emerald, is our court systems. Chuck Schumer, he kind of bragged, you know what? Trump may have won, but we have the courts. And darn, isn't that correct? We see activist judges not even making sound judgment. So I'm afraid that this will end up in the courts, and it just will be pushed aside that, nope, it's fine. There's no evidence of any wrongdoing. When I'm telling you, to my bones, I don't think he knew half of what was going on.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. I remember watching the man do the dementia shuffle across the driveway in the North Lawn on January 20th, 2021. And even I, having covered him in the campaign, from afar, because he wasn't really allowed to be out there, right, much around people. And when it was the very select group of reporters that they let in. I hadn't seen him in person, but I could tell just across video that he wasn't well. But even for me, it was very shocking to see him do the shuffle in front of me there on the North Lawn of the White House to take, be installed in the White House.
How about when he had to take orders from the bunny on the annual egg roll?
There were so many demoralizing moments during the Biden years.
We could do a lot of satire. The problem is this is a very...
Right. I was just going to say, you're absolutely right about the courts, and this has to be addressed. And isn't it funny? We were told the whole time by when he was majority leader, Mitch McConnell, that our focus was to get constitutional judges on the bench, right, in courts across the country, and that's what he was focused on. He couldn't confirm Donald Trump's appointees. They couldn't hold their confirmation hearings, but he was busy putting Federalist Society judges on benches across the country. But Chuck Schumer can say they own the courts. And we know that Chuck Schumer is right, because we're seeing the proof in the pudding. Even those who were put on the bench, during the first Trump term, they have turned out to be, you know, just like not maybe as far left leaning as the progressive judges put on the bench, but they're not adhering to, you know, good jurisprudence or the Constitution either. And we saw a lot of that in the January 6th cases. A couple of the Trump appointees were the worst judges with the most egregious courtrooms for J6ers.
Yeah, you never tell. I never liked it when all of us would say, oh, an Obama appointed, a Bush appointed, because to me, it shouldn't matter who appointed. You know, I'm a purist like you. I want them to follow the Constitution and make the best judgment for with everything they know, not being an activist. And that's what our court systems have become. I heard a statistic that cases against the White House, especially the executive branch, usually most presidents might get 20 of them. In President Trump's first month here, I think there was 53. It's just that they are prepared just to try to handicap him in any way. But what they don't realize is it just doesn't hurt Donald Trump. It doesn't hurt just his supporters. It hurts all of us. It hurts our national security. Imagine a judge saying, turn that plane around with trendy Agua with kidnappers, rapists, and murderers and have them come on back to America. Like, does that make any sense to you?
It only does if you are looking at it through the correct lens, that when you understand the framework. And I'm afraid, I fear, Dr. Maria, that many in Trump's administration, and maybe even the president himself, don't really understand the actual danger we're in and the problem we're facing as a country. You said, how can a judge try to turn around a plane with what we know aren't just gang members? They're actually basically paramilitary for the Venezuelan cartel, okay, which runs the Venezuelan government. What you have to understand is that our courts, our institutions have been infiltrated by Marxist, communist revolutionaries. That judge is a full-on communist. We have to identify these people and root them out. It has been a decades-long infiltration into our government, our courts, and our institutions. And we have to address that. And you can only address that when you understand the framework of it. I think there are some around Donald Trump who do, but not enough. 4 years is really not enough time. They have to be aggressive in this. There has to be an education in this ideology that has infiltrated so that people at the Pentagon working under Secretary Hegseth understand what they're really up against so that they can effectively root it out. And that is something that I'm going to actually hone in on and cover a lot on my show, The Absolute Truth. I've been working and talking with a lot of former and current intelligence officials who really understand this threat and how the infiltration occurred and the problem we face. That's why you get a judge that makes that kind of, when an average American even hears that decision, they say that's absolutely absurd. It's absurd. Well, it only makes sense when you understand the infiltration that has occurred in the United States and the fact that we have foreign governments that are kind of directed these revolutionaries in our government and the domestic threat we face.
You know, that is so insightful, Emerald, and so scary. You know, I use the words because I believe it, that of Marxism in our government, now in our judicial system, and communism. And you'll never believe it. When the movie Oppenheimer came out and they talked about communists infiltrating Berkeley and other Ivy League colleges and also the White House, I thought, wow, maybe now the public will see that it's been an ongoing problem and this thing is real, because I get a lot of pushback. Marxism, come on, there's no Marxism really in our government. And you just laid it out. I mean, they are trying to destroy us from within, turn us on each other, but with all the race baiting, turn us on each other about the sexist, trying to, look at the rich, they have everything and we have nothing. It's this tearing apart, not only at our fiber of freedom and liberty, but tearing us apart morally. What's happened to children under this Biden administration is nothing but pure evil. Not one Democrat would ever stand up to what happened to women and children on their trek to get into the United States. Not one. Not one. I couldn't believe it. I would call on my own congressional delegation. You say you're for women. You want to protect the innocent children when we know they're being raped multiple times. And it didn't stop at the journey when they entered the United States. A lot of them are in sex trafficking rings. And by the way, some of them were on that plane that went to El Salvador. So there's a lot of work, Emerald, and I am scared that there's not enough people to weed it out. And then how do we weed it out? I was talking to Victoria Tenzing, a very prominent lawyer, and she had lawfare used against her. She was spied on illegally. And we were talking about judges. I said, well, can we remove them from the bench? People can do that about lawyers, send in a complaint. She said, with a judge, it's very different. The bar is so high, nobody usually takes it on. But to me, what bar could be higher than treason to your country? So do you have any other ways we should be tackling this?
Here's what we do know is, at the very least, make them answer for themselves. Bring them before the public and make them squirm. And one way to do that is for Congress to impeach them, to bring them in or call them before Congress to testify. Ask them about those decisions and at least make them answer for themselves in front of the American people. Something else I'm looking into, particularly that pertains to the DC court, I've been told that Congress could essentially disband the court. They could change what they have jurisdiction over. That's something that I haven't delved into enough on my own, but there are very strong legal experts telling me that that's an action that can be taken by Congress. So I would say, Dr. Maria, that we need Congress to address the judicial issue, right? Jim Jordan needs to stop just having great sound bites and get some actual bite, because he's the head of the Judiciary Committee and it's up to him to bring them in. So at least that's the small thing that is an actual action item that could be done.
I like that. Some of our favorite Republicans have let us down a little bit too. James Comer had the goods for impeachment or to send even for criminal activity President Biden, and he failed to do that. He stopped short on it. I don't know if they're worried about their political careers. I don't know what it is, but it's got to be about accountability. And I like your approach to this. We've got to find ways and keep pushing it forward till the public says, this has got to stop, because we know when our voices band together, we can make good things happen. Now, tell my audience, which may be some crossover, but maybe different, what time is your show on?
Yeah, you can see me every day on LindellTV.com at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's for now. We are doing a lot of changes at the network. For now, you can tune in and watch us every evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday.
Now, you are also on cable television out in the Midwest. And besides, everybody can get us on Roku and Rumble. But I believe you're even on the cable channels in the Midwest.
I am. We're in tens of thousands of households, I think. You know what? I probably should say, because I don't know the exact number. I know we're in the Midwest. We're on some cable sections, and we're hoping to grow that. And I've just been really excited, especially over the last few months, Dr. Maria. You and the mayor and your all's team have been a big part of that. We've just seen so much growth here at the network. And look, we're breaking stories and offering analysis and commentary and insight that you just don't see anywhere else. And I'll tell you, a real testament to that is I get phone calls from foreign officials saying, hey, what about this and this and this and this? And this is us at Lindell TV. I'm just so proud of how much we're growing and how much we're continuing to grow. And so I also love that we're connecting so much. As it's just great to be on with you, Dr. Maria. We got to see each other at the RNC last summer, and we had so much fun. You made me laugh so much.
That was so much fun. I admire you. You're a great investigative journalist. You're authentic. And I've been telling everybody who will listen, it was Emerald Robinson on Absolute Truth who broke that Autopen story. And then our very own Kara Castronova at the White House as a correspondent, she asked the question, and Caroline Levitt was taken back. So thankfully, Kara was able to ask that question because Caroline Levitt then went right to the president.
Yeah.
Well,
it definitely caught her attention, right?
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to have you on again.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's so much fun to be with you, and that's the absolute truth.
Very good. Well, I'm going to take a short commercial break, and I'll be right back with you. And guess who's joining me? Somebody who's going to talk about the JFK files. Stay tuned.
Forget about keto, carnivore, low carb, and intermittent fasting diets. If you want to drop stubborn extra pounds and maintain a healthy weight, you need to rejuvenate your overworked liver. Studies have shown that the rate of an overworked liver has skyrocketed by 131% over the past 30 years. And lots of things have contributed to that, like eating processed junk food, drinking alcohol, and even toxic exposure. That's why it is crucial that you take action now to rejuvenate your liver. And that's exactly what Liver Health Formula can help you do. Join in thousands of others in supporting a thriving liver and healthy weight. You can try Liver Health Formula risk-free, and as a bonus gift, receive a free bottle of omega-3s with your order. Try Liver Health Formula by going to getliverhelp.com/Lindell and claim your free bonus gift. That's getliverhelp.com/Lindell.
You all know I stand by the truth, and if I put my name on something, I truly believe in it. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to something I'm incredibly proud of. My own brand of organic specialty coffee, Rudy Coffee. Believe me when I say it's the best coffee you'll ever try. It's smooth, rich, chocolatey, and gentle on your stomach. It's so good, I even recommend drinking it black. It comes in 3 varieties, including what I promise is the best decaf you'll ever have. You can order now by scanning the QR code on your screen or by visiting rudy.coffee. By supporting Rudy Coffee, you're not just treating yourself to exceptional coffee, you're also supporting our cause, the cause of truth, justice, and American democracy. You'll also be supporting the Call to Action nonprofit, which is devoted to helping veterans and first responders, so you can make a difference and taste the difference by ordering today at rudy.coffee.
Are you looking for monthly income without the risk of stocks? Here's something you won't hear on CNBC. There's actually a unique way to collect royalties directly from America's most productive oil fields. No exploring, drilling, or operational headaches. You simply collect checks month after month. The best part? You can get started with just $25 through any brokerage account. The Oxford Club's chief income strategist, Mark Lichtenfeld, breaks down what he believes is the #1 oil royalty play for 2025. Visit mariaoilboom.com now to learn more. That's right, mariaoilboom.com. Stop buying oil stocks and start collecting oil royalty checks instead. Welcome back. As promised, President Trump said he would release the JFK files, and he did. Now, a lot of people were tied up watching the astronauts land, and suddenly there's no executive summary. So people are going to have to wade through this, and there's going to have to be good reporting. And I am lucky that I have Edward Sauls, who works here right at Lindell TV as a producer. He's also a great documentarian and did the documentary Died Suddenly. Well, welcome to the show, Edward. As President Trump promised, here they are, but no executive summary. What have you found out?
Well, it's funny. It was promises made, promises kept. A lot of people are just finding everything they can to criticize President Trump. He is the first president to release these, and I have read through all 80,000 pages, and I can report
Wow.
back that well, the first thing I'd say is clearly the CIA's role was being downplayed over the last 30 years. I think had we known to the extent of which the CIA was both operating and involved in the operation, which was happening in New Orleans and also in Dallas, I think we would have probably shut down the agency about 30 years ago. Okay, because the first thing is at the time of the Kennedy assassination, the CIA what was saying that they were primarily only focused on counterespionage, Cold War activity, and it's funny. One of the documents that is related to a document I'm going to get into in just a moment. It lays out where every single station is, every single headquarters for the CIA is located around the world, but also what they're doing domestically. Now, about 10 years ago, this was raised, and the question was, what is the CIA doing if they're operating domestically? They shouldn't be operating domestically. They're a
Right.
foreign counterintelligence, intelligence agency. But as we know, going back to Operation Crossfire Hurricane, which really involved a lot of people, including some of the station chiefs in England for the CIA, Gina Haspel being one of them. Not saying Gina specifically did anything wrong, but Gina was the station chief, which oversaw the transmission of the Steele dossier and other intelligence, which was then later used to bog down President Trump in his first term. But going to what I've found so far, Maria, firstly, there is definitely something that needs to be looked at in regard to Jack Ruby. Now, there's a document that I found last night. It's part of a report that's about 452 pages. Only about 53 of those pages are currently available, meaning that either those pages have been burned, which is possible in this clandestine world, or it is that they haven't yet been declassified and released because of maybe the contents. Now, what I found in there was the assistant director to the FBI at the time. He was interviewed by the Warren Commission. They were looking into anything he might know about the operations the CIA was conducting and the other clandestine and maybe criminal organizations such as the mafia figures who were involved in Dallas and in New Orleans. And what he said is that they were looking into the work relationship between Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, just to refresh everyone's memory, Jack Ruby is the man that shot Lee Harvey Oswald as he was being
On
brought out
TV. Yeah.
on TV. A lot of
Yep.
people saw it live. It was a terrible thing to watch. And it was thought up until very recently, this is just a conspiracy theory to even suggest that Jack Ruby possibly knew Lee Harvey Oswald prior to the murder that occurred at the courthouse. And look, this document now shows that not only were they looking into this, I'm talking about the FBI, the Warren Commission, and even the CIA was questioned on this. What work relationship did the two have? And I'll tell you why this is relevant. So a couple years ago, my team produced a film called Kill Shot. It was a investigation into a bioweapons gain-of-function research program based out of New Orleans. Now, this program actually had a woman by the name of Judith Very Baker. She was a child prodigy. There's a book written about it called Dr. Mary's Monkeys, but this is about a different Mary. It's about Dr. Mary Sherman, who was a fascinating doctor who was murdered in New Orleans. But this bioweapons program was being carried out by the CIA. They were trying to weaponize something called SV-40. Now, I know you've reported on this in the past. A lot of people might know the phrase SV-40. It's because SV-40 is the simian virus 40. It's something that's found in human and simian viral cells. But it since has become kind of famous because it is documented to have caused cancer, an acceleration of cancer. It was actually found as fragmentation DNA in the COVID-19 shots. Well, going back to the files and everything that we've now learned with this, the bioweapons program that was being carried out in New Orleans, it involved Jack Ruby and it involved Lee Harvey Oswald, who was the assigned bodyguard, but also the man who was going to take the vial of this bioweapon and give it to Fidel Castro in some form or manner to cause him to have a heart attack, cause him to develop cancer. And I have a couple
Interesting.
questions, I think. It's kind of crazy to think about. Is
Yeah.
on the cusp of learning that documents about the assassination of JFK. We've also now seen that there was an extensive program involving the biomedical industry, the other deep state. I think many people at this point believe, based on what we learned during the scandemic, that same group was involved in killing another world leader. My question, Maria, after reading through the documents, one, I want that full report unredacted. I would
Mm.
like to see all of it. I can only see 53 of about 250 pages of this. But second, if they were working together, were they working as employees of the CIA? If that's the case, my goodness, we need to shut down that agency. But what do you think?
You know, that's been the rumor for a long time that Lee Harvey Oswald was either KGB, CIA, or both. And I understand that the KGB, after President Kennedy's death, in hearing the rumors, started looking at themselves to see, was he an agent? Was there anything in the files about that?
There were several documents which detailed the suspicion that Lee Harvey Oswald was an agent of the KGB. But as you noted, when the CIA looked into it and wrote a memo about such suspicions, they concluded it was inconclusive. They don't know if he was. And we know, for example, Lee Harvey Oswald traveled to Moscow. We know he had a Russian wife. I think after reading what I've read and looking through this case, it would be too easy for us to kind of settle on the fact that he was a Russian spy that killed our president. I think the truth is far more complicated. I do believe he was a spy. I think he was recruited from the Marine Corps to serve both in the CIA and in some pro-communist forces. We know in New Orleans, he was working both sides. There was actually a pretty infamous incident that happened where Lee Harvey Oswald was caught protesting for communism, and then the next day was caught coming against communism. He was working for Inca. It's one of the Cold War organizations that was based out of New Orleans. It was built during the Cold War to combat the spread of communism in our hemisphere. But I think that it may be a limited hangout. I think also it's a limited hangout to settle on the, because some people today were hyper focusing on potential redactions related to some nation states, especially Israel. The truth is, Israel didn't kill John F. Kennedy. All right, that's
Right.
a lot of people would like to conclude to that today, but the truth is that a nasty web of criminals, of clandestine operatives, and even politicians who had a lot to gain, including the presidency itself, looked to have had a role in the death of John F.
Lyndon
Kennedy. And
Johnson.
at the time,
Yeah.
yes, of course, Lyndon Johnson. I believe it was Richard Nixon once told Roger Stone. He recounted this in his book. He said, I really wanted to be president, but I wasn't willing to kill for it, like others
Wow.
did. And he's referring to Lyndon Johnson. I know that looking at the memoirs and the records on this, that I believe JFK's wife believed that Johnson did it. It's kind of an interesting topic because Johnson was really a nasty individual. You can look at some things to say, well, he created the welfare state. He helped. He did some good programs.
History has said that about him. He was vile. He didn't treat women well. He actually paid for his Senate seat. He went to the floor cash. Like he just was a bad dude. I want to ask you about
He's the
this
Obama of Texas.
Yeah, yes. I want to ask you about this guy that I believe was CIA, Gary Underhill, I believe his name was. And a day after President Kennedy was shot, he left Washington, D.C., went to New Jersey, confided to some of his friends that he believed a small clique of rogue CIA killed President Kennedy. And don't you know, 6 months later, he was killed. Was there anything more about that in the files?
Well, there was a memo detailing this and the interview. Sorry, I just got disconnected. Do you hear me now? Yeah, I'll pick up right
Perfect.
there. There was a memo that detailed this and detailed again that he'd come home and said that there's something very, very untoward happening at his work, and he's afraid he's going to get killed. Well, the truth is, Mr. Underhill was among maybe 20 individuals that found an untimely end after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, to include several members of the CIA. And I'm thinking back to one of the top facial reconstruction individuals. Same story, came home, told his wife, "We've got to leave. We got to pack our bags. We got to get out of here." Still don't know why that individual was so angry or so scared. But in regard to Mr. Underhill, I think the story's the same. That if you
Mm.
even touched the operation, that whether it be an anti-communist operation that turned into being anti-Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs failure, or it was something else related to maybe criminal activity or drug trafficking and many of the sorts of which the CIA is engaged in to fund themselves over the years, you were on a kill list after this. And unfortunately, what we've learned from spy films, and I think have been now vindicated and has been confirmed through reading through these truly clandestine files, the easiest way to cover up something, especially a national disaster, a terrible assassination such as John F. Kennedy, is to kill off all the members of the conspiracy. And I think this is what they did
How
with Mr.
scary. And when we think CIA, that's our Central Intelligence Agency. And the fact that they're so rogue, and we believe they are today. Some of the USAID funding went to the CIA working in other countries to sway elections. But I also believe that they did some of those things within the United States as well. So I have a question. One shooter, two shooters? I always believe two. Well, did they make any statements towards that?
There is not any question of the shooter narrative. I think that these documents, one, are not the entire trove. Not that President Trump hasn't released everything that he has available to him. I think he
Mhm.
did. I think there is more, and I think there's more out of Dallas, for example. I think Jim Garrison had quite the dossier, and I think in regards to
Yes.
the shooter narrative, I believe there was up to 5 or 6 shooters, and I believe this
Wow.
because there is a man that's come forward. It was about 2 years ago now. The interview is now starting to circulate once again on social media. Mr. Fields, I believe his last name is. He claims that he shot JFK. He's the one that actually did the kill shot. He also claims that there were several other shooters who missed or were unable to get the iconic headshot which their kill team was going for. And it's such a weird situation, by the way, Dr. Murray, because I don't know about you, but if someone were to admit to me or to joke around me that they'd killed the president of the United States, I feel that it's within our civic duty to at least punch this guy in the nose or something. Well, maybe something far worse. Okay, you killed the president, but yeah, it's odd to hear this man speak about it, and especially in such detail. I think he should be arrested, and I think he should be investigated. But
Yeah.
he claims he's doing it on behalf of the CIA, and he said he was part of a multi-shooter team, and it was all meant to look like an ambush. It was supposed to look like something terrible had happened. The gangs or as it's now the official narrative is that Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone gunman, was the one that shot him.
Mm.
I don't think anyone with a brain on their head with some common sense in their mind is going to believe that narrative. But in regard to your question, I think it's more than one shooter. There was no new documentations on this,
Okay.
but I do believe we're there arounds to demand more documentation from the government we now control.
I know. And will we ever know the truth? People have died, maybe been killed. I don't know if we'll ever know everything. It would be interesting to hear Robert Kennedy Jr., what he thinks happened to his uncle. I do know several family members did blame Lyndon Johnson. But I've heard all the stories through the years as you have. It's the mob, it was the CIA. But what I can't wrap my mind around is the why. Any information about the why?
Yes, there was. I'll just share this. I did interview RFK Jr. about 3 years ago, and he revealed to us he believed it was the CIA that had killed his uncle. And so
Yeah.
he today, I think he's still reading through these documents and looking at. He would still believe that yes, the CIA was deeply involved. The why is a very, very interesting question. As I mentioned before, the Bay of Pigs. I believe that there were several factions in our government that would have liked to see a military takeover, a successful one at that, in Cuba. And when the air support was pulled from the ground forces, which were trained actually here in South Florida, and I'm not too far from where some of the patriotic Cuban freedom fighters were trained. I think that several generals and several criminal organizations and individuals involved with those cartels and those criminal entities, they got very angry to the place where they wanted revenge. So
Mm.
there's one motive there. The motive being that we look at essentially could people have seen our JFK as an impediment to business, especially when you're in the war
Mm.
industry. I think the second look would be there was several questions that related to what he was going to do related to foreign policy. And that there's obviously today a lot of discussion about the rise of Israel's nuclear program and
Mm.
the discussions related to this. I do think that JFK was very skeptical of unmitigated and unchecked support for Israel, but at the same time, he was a great supporter of the nation state of Israel. Without JFK providing what materials and support that the United States did provide at that time, Israel would not be the nation state it is today, nor would they have overcome several defensive wars over the last 30 to 40 years. So it's incorrect to say that JFK was critical to the place where he was about to cut off or act belligerently toward Israel. But I think the
Mm.
Israel motive is lacking in the sense that Israel themselves, I think they were hurt more than they were helped by JFK leaving. And I believe that because do you think that it helps a nation for the citizens of the parent nation supporting them to believe that they were involved in an assassination plot for one of the
Mm.
most beloved presidents of that nation's history? I don't think so. Now, the
No.
third motive, we've looked to say, well, maybe he was killed because he was just trying to do far too much shakeup inside the government. It's an interesting and kind of eerie, parallel and mirror to
Yeah.
today's government efforts with Doge and with President Trump. Just look at the things people are saying now. They want to murder Elon Musk. They've wanted to murder
Mm.
President Trump. They tried to murder President Trump, but
Tried
now
him
they want to
twice.
murder the members of Doge. Yeah, for twice, and Doge. They want to blow up the cars and kill the members of Doge and kill Elon Musk just because he's finding the ways that they've been funneling money.
Mm.
Right? I think that the truth of the matter is, our nation after World War II, we were the greatest nation left on the landscape, the richest, and we did a lot with that wealth to help the nations around us. We're very, harmonious and also very generous to the nations around us, the nations in Europe and elsewhere. I think that what came with us also is we made some bedfellows with many individuals who are of the globalist mindset. They wanted to use this power
Mm.
and this wealth to shape the world, not in America's image, not in Lady Liberty's image, but instead in an image maybe of fiefdoms and individual power structures. Like I think a lot of the criminal organizations, for example, we found now there was clearly an intersection between the CIA and these criminal organizations, and
Mm.
this was probably to make people rich. I think many people became rich. So it could be a classic example of corrupt individuals who wanted to become multimillionaires, and they saw JFK as far too honest to allow their dream to come to fruition.
Yeah, and that's probably most likely it, and most likely within our CIA. It's just awful. But I wanted to ask you about a letter, and I know you didn't have a lot of time to read 80,000 pages, and I'm impressed that you did. But the letter, let's see if we could pull it up, Drake. The letter says Lee Harvey Oswald will be killed after killing JFK. Now, who is this from? I see British
To the British
ambassador.
ambassador. Yes, and
Yeah.
it was written by Sergei Konsonovich. If you scroll down there, you'll see it was
Yep.
It was written by and it was signed by Sergei Konstanovich. It was sent to DC. And this is a very interesting question because I think this would confirm that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the lone gunman and also was working maybe inside a team. And as we've already noted, was killed off after to cover up some of the evidence in the footsteps. This letter is intriguing to me because there's a letter that's in our archives. That means that the British have information on this individual also. It means that while many people around the world were hyper focused on America releasing our JFK files, where's Britain's? Where's Russia's? And I would caution other nations to criticize us for not being transparent, not being fulfilling, and these things, while they themselves sit on tranches of documentation. I'll hone in on Britain right now because it was the British that hid that their very king was a Nazi sympathizer for about 50 years. I wonder what they have in the JFK file, and that letter is enough, I think, for President Trump to ask Keir Starmer or maybe even King Charles, hey, can you release to give closure to our people?
Ooh, I like that. The other thing I noticed in that particular letter is he mentions Martin Luther King being killed, and that happened as well. Crazy. And I feel I have empathy and sympathy for the Kennedy family because whenever any of this stuff comes up, it relives the pain. But I'm sure I would think they're curious and want to know the truth. But it was odd, the reaction of the King family. They actually did not want President Trump to release things publicly. And I don't know if I don't know the legalities of that. Should it be, shouldn't be? He was certainly a national figure, a beloved person, and we would all be curious and want to know why was he murdered by whom. But yeah, I have not heard
I'll say
President.
this:
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a societal question. 'Cause there were several people today that said to me, why does this matter? Why are we digging up the past? Why are we digging through the history of this nation only to give ourselves black eyes from the misdeeds that were done in the past? The King family is an intriguing one.
Hmm.
I personally do not believe some of the rumors that have been circulated, or even some of the things which have been leaked, such as the notion that the FBI found material that was of a sexual nature and compromising for Martin Luther King, and that they were
We heard
surveilling
that
him. It
for
is true they were
years,
surveilling
though.
him.
Yeah, we
Yes,
heard
and
that for years. But to kill a
what I
man
was going to
over
say
it?
is, oh yeah, and why would you kill a man? I think that, well, the first thing is, why are people not more angry that the FBI was spying on Martin Luther King with no
Mm,
just cause, right? The second, I do think the family suspects that some evidence may have been manufactured, or there are things which were gathered and which could be released, which would take far too much work and heartache just to give characterization around. Thus, for them, they would much rather that these secrets lay at rest. To your
yeah.
question, to what extent does the public have a right to disregard the wishes of the family? And
Mm,
I would simply point to, we do have an established rule of thumb when it comes to the death of individuals. And there's two things with it. One, we wait until the family has been informed, has been told
mm,
about the loss of their family. The second is, we do everything in our power to not show grotesque images of
mm.
their loved ones who've been mutilated and killed. That's an unwritten rule. No one has
Yeah.
challenged that. No one has said, my First Amendment right has been violated.
Yeah.
Maybe there's more to this, especially if there's a spy implication. Maybe they said that, for example, MLK was a communist, these other things, but still, if the King family has asked for privacy as an American citizen and as a private individual, I would probably support honoring that. But again,
I would
it's a
too.
free country, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Well, we only have about 1 minute left, Edward, and this was wonderful. I have a very odd question. Where is President Kennedy's head? For a while, literally, his head was removed, and they had it in an office in the White House for a year or more. But then I'm told it disappeared. I don't know. Maybe why would the family want it? I don't know. Do you know anything about our President Kennedy's head?
What I've heard is that there was a member of the Biden administration that has taken it. And I'll have to look into this further, but my understanding is that the Bidens removed it. And
Oh
it's,
my
if we were
goodness.
to look in their trove, it might show up at their library in Pennsylvania.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Well, I thank you so much for joining me. This was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, I am sure we're going to learn more. It's just crazy. And of course, we want to know. He was our president. As much as we may not like policies of this president or that president, our president is our president. I think Biden and Obama were a little bit different to most people because we believe there was an anti-American type vibe amongst them. But Emerald answered a question for me. I always wondered why they did a fake Oval Office set. I thought every which way but Sunday, trying to figure this out. It was to fit teleprompters. So thank you, Emerald. Thank you for joining me. I will see you on Friday night. Thank you.